Okay, so we're going to start to talk about abiotic factors. And abiotic, the prefix a means what? Without. Without. So a means without. So abiotic factor underneath temp humidity. Yeah, I ran out of space. Okay, so we've got a big list of things that can affect a living thing. How does, well, let's talk about water. So all living things have to maintain water balance because what? You die, yeah. Homeostasis. You have to maintain homeostasis. Staying the same. Keeping it nice and steady. So water balance is going to affect things. For a plant, what does that translate into?
Drowning.
Translates into rainfall. So sun, for a plant again, translates into the ability to make food. And we're really talking about, the sun's going to affect the temperature. A lot of the things on this list sort of roll into some bigger concepts like weather. A few people mentioned pH, soil pH, or a few people mentioned soil. Soil pH is a huge one. I know I had a few of you who said you have gardened or do garden. Blueberries. Does anybody like blueberries? I love blueberries. I'm not going to ruin anything for you. Not this time. Not right now. So, blueberries. If you grow blueberries, they need acid soil. Guess where blueberries grow left to their own devices? In forests that have pretty acid soil. Someplace that's got soil that's not very acidic, blueberries don't do real well because the soil pH affects the plant.
So, like, if you had a calculator curve.
So we've got this tolerance curve. We've got the area where things really can't survive. They don't thrive at all. We've got the area where they survive, but they're not necessarily thriving. And then we've got the sweet spot. We've got the area where everything wants to be, where all of the needs are met. They've got exactly what they need, no more, no less. In this green area, you'll have maximum growth. You'll have reproduction. You'll have success. Do you realize that if you're not in this green area, reproduction is harder? So, do you all realize that animals can lose the ability to reproduce because of physiological stress? Did you know that? No. That's a natural biological. That's fine. That's the natural end of a reproductive lifespan. I'm talking about if you're starving to death, your body shuts down egg and sperm production. Because the body basically says, hey, you barely have enough resources to keep yourself alive. We can't waste any energy on making a new person. Can't do it. Can't handle it. And so in situations where humans are deprived of nutrients, the body shuts off reproduction. Because the body basically, reproduction is expensive from an energy perspective. It takes a lot of calories to produce cells to make a new human. And on the female end, it takes a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of calories to get that from one fertilized egg up to a whole new person. I mean, you're growing like 30 million cells inside you. My God. It's exhausting. And it requires extra calories to do that. If you're not getting enough calories, the body says, hey, you don't have the energy to spare. Don't even think about it. And the body just shuts down reproductive capacity. That's out. Where do you think that would occur? Green, yellow, or red?
Red.
Well, red's actually where you're on the way to not even surviving yourself. So out here on the edges of the yellow is where the body may start to limit reproduction. Once you get into the red, yeah, there is no doubt you're not reproducing. Your body doesn't have energy to spare. Case study. What do you know about Europe in the 1940s? What was happening? No. That was like 1490s. Okay, Europe in the 1940s. What was going on? What was the big event? What was it? World War II. In a lot of parts of Europe, people were starving. In Holland, they talk about the starvation winter, which I believe was 1944. It was at the end of the war. But there were so few calories available for people. I mean, so at that point, the Dutch had survived the Germans coming through. They had survived, war raging through their country. And now the war was pretty much over, but everything had been destroyed. I mean, how do you grow food when you've got no shelter left? When, your horses have all been killed? When, there's no fuel available if you do have motorized farm machines? How do you grow food? And on top of that, there were weather conditions. It was a rough winter. So people starved. There are accounts of pregnant women who lost weight during their entire pregnancies. So managed to successfully get pregnant and then gave birth giving less than they had. That's kind of crazy. I mean, these people went through tremendous hardship. Now, a lot of women would have lost their babies. And there were probably a lot of reproductive rates were probably much lower because people in those kind of starvation situations, their bodies won't allow reproduction. But there were babies born during that starvation winter. It's what's interesting is they've looked at health effects, and there are health effects on those kids. I mean, those people are now in their 70s and 80s. There are long-term health effects from the health of their mothers during their pregnancies. It's amazing stuff. But those are people who were out in these edges of the tolerance curve. They were not in the green zone. They were not in the healthy ability to thrive zone. So we can talk about temperature. If you go to the bottom of the ocean, and I think when you guys watched the ecosystem video with the sub last week, you watched the one about freshwater ecosystems, yes? Okay. There's one on marine ecosystems we'll watch at some point. If you get down to the bottom of the sea floor, whoops, wrong color, there are hot vents where the temperature is 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Huh? Well, these are hot vents where yes, most of the bottom ocean is very cold. These are places where there are actually cracks in the Earth's crust, and you've got magma, and so you've basically got superheated water that's coming in contact with melted rock. So these are really hot spots. They're unusual. But you've got these vents where it's like 750 degrees, and there are animals that live there happily. There are bacteria that live there and thrive there. If you put a normal bacteria from your kitchen counter into a 750 degree space, what's going to happen? It'll die. Which is why we cook meat to an internal temperature of 160? 160 it dies. So we've got these things that live at 750. Well, what happens, you think, if you take one of those bacteria that's used to living at 750 and you put it someplace where the temperature is only 160 degrees? It'll die. There's the tolerance curve. What if you put it someplace where the temperature's, 1,500 degrees? It'll die. It's really happy right in there. That's that green zone of the tolerance curve. Everything's orange and red zones might be a little bit different, but the fact is, we all have them. We all have them. So for any abiotic factor you can think of, there is a place where you do really, really, really well, and a place where you don't do so well. So there are plants that live in desert areas where they literally get no moisture in some years. There's a phenomena that occurs in some deserts. I've seen it, and it's bizarre. It's called viraga. Rain falls from the cloud, and before it hits the ground, it evaporates. So you're standing under a rain cloud, you're looking up, and you can see it raining over your head. Nothing hits your face, because the air is so dry that it evaporates midair. It's called viraga. So there are plants that live in places where they literally get zero precipitation in some years, but they survive. Other plants live in rainforests where they're getting, feet, tens or 20 feet of rain per year. And so they have a very different green zone. So let's say we've got a plant from around here, and we get about 70 inches of rain a year. The plant here, whoops, is probably pretty happy in that range. Okay, so we'd look at that and we'd say, yeah, that's probably a plant from, the eastern deciduous forest. It's green zone. It's maximum, maximum health and happiness, if plants can be said to have happiness, is, at the precipitation levels we have here. What if we drew on top of that the tolerance curve for a desert plant? How would that look different? Where would the high point be for a desert plant? Yeah, for a desert plant, that high point would probably be over here someplace. And that tolerance curve is going to look very, very different. So, that would, that might be where they're happiest. What about a plant that grows in the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest? Where would its peak on its tolerance curve be? Up on the other end. It's going to be something like this. So it's going to have a tolerance curve that's up there. You can look at tolerance curves for temperature, precipitation, calories, energy in, and what that tolerance curve is going to show you is where an organism thrives and where it dies, where it doesn't have enough of what it needs, or it has enough of what it needs. But every organism has got its own tolerance curve. There's nothing for which the tolerance curve looks like that. Okay? What would that be? Yeah, that would be one that it doesn't matter. Abiotic factors have no effect on it. It can live with 0 rain. It can live with, 100 feet of rain a year. No difference. That plant doesn't exist. Or that's a bacteria that can go from negative 50 degrees up to 800 degrees. No such species exists. Everything is happiest in a particular range. Everything does best in a particular range. Around here, our soils are fairly neutral. Forest soils tend to be a little bit acid. We talked about some domestic crops that need either acid or sweet soils. And we have some plants and some bacteria that do really well in acidic soil. If we're thinking about domestic plants, blueberries are one. There are some that require very alkaline soil, which is the opposite of acid.
Does that make cranberries?
No, it's a different kind of use of the term. But it's the same word, you're right. There's nothing that can stand that entire range. There's nothing that can stand that entire range. So again, we see that. And there will probably be a question on your test for this chapter with a tolerance graph. Under conditions of this and this, is this organism thriving, surviving, or on its way to dying? You can look at a tolerance graph and tell me that. So, let's practice one of these. So let's say we're talking about some soil bacteria. Soil is full of bacteria. It's a good thing. Without soil bacteria, we'd all die. So let's say that this is pH. And here we have a pH of, this is something like slightly acid soil. So this is 5 to 6. 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 8, 9, 10. We don't even get to the 11s. Okay. So at a soil pH of 4 for this organism, so somewhere right here, is this organism thriving? Is it at its maximum capacity, reproducing as much as it's possibly able to, growing as well as it possibly can? No. Is it surviving? Yeah. It's muddling along. It's doing okay. It's not thriving, but it's hanging in there. You know, it's not on its way out either. I mean, it's not in a zone where it's in serious danger. It's surviving.